Hello, my name is Junelle Matthias. I go to Common Academy, and it's nice to meet you.
It's nice to meet you, Junelle.
So how are you today?
Very well, very well.
So what are your interests?
What are my interests? So my interests break down into both academic and extracurricular interests. So from the academic perspective, in other words, what I do for research, my field is called signal processing. And that's a very fancy way of saying that you try to extract information out of data that comes out from the real world. So a good example of what I'm working on now is I help scientists who record from the brains of animals and humans sometimes to understand what is a particular brain region doing. So for example, we're working on a project where my collaborator is studying how does one mouse learn of another mouse's experience of fear. So you've got two mice in a box. One of them sees the other mouse receive an electric shock, mild one, it's not too painful, and you record from the brain of the mouse that seeing the other one receive the shock. And you're asking, does the brain learn after a while that when it hears an auditory sound that this becomes predictive of a shock? Yeah.
I always thought the brain would work like that because after seeing things that happen in a couple times, I kind of pick up the pattern.
Right, so the question is, once your brain picks up the pattern, right, there might be scenarios in which this might not be good for your brain. So a simple example is, well, I hope this never happens to me or you, you're walking down the street and I get mugged and you see me get mugged. So your brain sees this. And the question is, if it learns that, hey, this street is a bad street, is it going to keep this memory for a while? Because you wouldn't want it to do that to the extent that it's going to affect essentially your daily quality of life, right?
Well, for some people, that's how it works. If you see a bad thing happen in a certain place, they tend to avoid that place. So I read your bio and it says you're interested in bioengineering. So explain to me what that is and what exactly do you do.
Okay, so bioengineering in my context means, so first, how do you help scientists understand? So there's the bio part. So there's a scientist that's studying, in my case, neuroscience. So they're cutting open in animals' brains, for example. How do you help them understand once they get signals from the brain? So do you want me to clarify what a signal is, or was that pretty clear?
Yeah, it's pretty clear, but I feel like you should expand on the signal more so I have a very rich definition.
Okay. So let's, this is great because I teach this stuff, so I should be able to tell you very simply what a signal is. So let's do this by example. So you have a temperature sensor in your home, right? You get a different temperature reading at a different time of the day. So think of this as a bunch of numbers written out as a list. That's a signal. So signal is basically a list of numbers through time. Right? So once you poke into the brain, you're recording things such as electrical voltages. That's how cells in the brain communicate with each other, basically. Now, these scientists come to me, we're recording from the brain of this mouse and we're trying to study fear in mice. Can you help us through mathematical modeling? This is the engineering part. So using sophisticated mathematics, can you help us understand what is happening from these signals that we're recording? So in a nutshell, that's what bioengineering is.
That's a pretty simple definition. I like how it is you compare you get the technology, the math, and you bring them together to create something. So
absolutely.
That's cute.
And the bio part, I'm simplifying it very much. In my case, the bio part has to do with neuroscience, right? But it means a lot of diverse things for other people. There's people that are studying biomaterials. How do you make smart clothes? Right? There could be some. How do you make smart
clothes? Like the new watches that you put on your hand now, and it's touch screen. Have you seen those?
I've seen those. Yeah. So that's an example of bioengineering, for example, right? So it means a lot of different things, but it's this combination of understanding chemistry, physics, along with engineering and mathematical modeling.
So what piqued your interest in bioengineering?
So it evolved through the years. So initially my interest was, I know very early on that I wanted to do this thing called signal processing. Again, signal is a list of numbers. The processing part is how do you extract interesting information from that list of numbers. So that's how I started. The bioengineering parts, and this was around the time I was in high school, 17, 18. So at that point I knew I wanted to study signal processing, and this was all the way to the point that I decided to do a PhD, and that was in 2004. Right? Now, through my PhD career, I met a gentleman who was working on signal processing, but for the brain. And it turns out that people that were typically from my background then we're working on applications such as wireless communication, so cell phones, image processing. So you're probably too young to remember this, but when the first browsers came out, it used to be that when you loaded an image, it would be very, very pixelated, and it would become clearer and clearer. That's signal processing. Exactly, that's signal processing. But all of this to say that those were the typical applications when I started studying this, and I saw this person that was doing something very different. I'm like, oh, I already know how to do this part. Let me learn something different that my peers are not exposed to. And this might give me some advantage in the future. Yeah.
I can tell it did give you some advantage.
Thank you.
Because not a lot of people have that opportunity that you had to like see how something you like, but like in a different way.
Yeah. I think that's so beyond just being smart, or I think curiosity and the ability to, for lack of a better word, this is cliche, not to think outside the box, but to be able to make connections between things that don't look like they're connected. I think that's a huge component of being a successful scientist or researcher.
Yeah. So, what challenges have you faced as a person of color in the field of science?
That's a difficult one to answer. It depends on who's watching. Who's going to be watching this?
We can't predict the future, as you know.
So what challenges have I faced? I think the main challenge is there's something to seeing other people that look like you.
Yes.
I think so.
It makes you like feel more comfortable.
Yeah, I think there's something to be said about that. I mean, I think we can talk all we want about, because you don't do the science or the engineering in a vacuum. At least we're not in that future yet where I can just be stuck in a building and have robots interact with me. We're not there yet. And even then, robots are not humans, right? At least we haven't made them human yet. So I think the main challenge has been like seeing more people that are around you, right? And this is not to say that, I mean, I have fantastic colleagues, right? But I mean, let me give you a very simple example. So I was born in Africa, right? So I grew up listening to certain kinds of music, hearing certain jokes, right? That can get lost culturally or in translation. So the fact that there's another person out there that kind of shares a cultural background and that you can have these moments with, it helps makes the work part, which is hard, let's be honest, easier. So I think the seeing more people such as yourself is,
So in your department or where you work, are there a lot of people of color there?
So I think there's a reasonable number of them. So I at least know of 4 other people that are within engineering.
And how many people are within the engineering as a whole? About how much, an estimate?
So a good estimate is, in the School of Engineering, I would say about on the order of 100 faculty.
Over. Yes. Yeah. And only 4 African American?
Again, these are guesstimates.
Estimate.
So
well, that's a very small ratio.
We should correct my, if these figures are wrong, this is just based on what I see on the daily.
Well, you gave me an idea that the majorities of other race and African Americans are not that high in numbers. So that's the point, which is good. So what resources, you were like speaking of how we agreed like not everyone had the like opportunity to like experience something they like but in a new way. So what resources do you think like affluent communities can like give to like schools so their students can like be exposed to science?
So what resources affluent communities could give to
No, what resources could like people or you, for example, like give to affluent communities to like help them expose their kids to science?
Yeah, actually that's a great question because it's something I've been thinking about over the past day. So for me, at least in this day and age, I think one of the things that's very easy for us to do, and I'm working on this. So you asked me about my interest earlier. I told you about research. So outside of research, I'm very interested in this thing called data science. Have you heard of data science?
No, but I assume it's numbers and science.
Yeah, absolutely. Great guess. So there's one missing part, which is computers. So I'm sure you've heard of Google, Facebook, and this world, right? So there's a huge push towards using computers to process a lot of data.
Because computers do it faster than us.
Computers, that's faster and more accurately than
yes.
We, right? So there's this huge push towards companies such as Facebook, Google, use computers and mathematical modeling to extract information from data. For example, I'm not on Facebook myself, but when I used to be, or there was an article about this, where you know how your timeline depends on who the actual user is, yes. Right? So there's an algorithm behind this.
I know that
processes text.
And like what depend on what you like that algorithm like keeps popping up things that you might like.
So that's data science working in the background.
Yeah.
So I think one of the things that's not hard for us to do is to bring these tools to these communities. And one way to do it, or at least that I've been trying to do this, is through the cloud. So imagine if you could just be sitting at home, say you have a home computer or a laptop, right?
Yes.
And you could just go on your browser and connect to a website where all of a sudden there's a programming platform for you, and there's kind of a curriculum that is kind of tailored to you, that helps you learn about coding.
So it's like online learning.
Yeah, but for coding and data science, and important part I think this is usually the missing part when we try to increase representation of underserved community in STEM, is you have to connect it to things that they're interested in.
Yes, because people don't like doing things they're not interested in.
Exactly. So I think that's an important piece. It's not just bring the science and the technology in, right? But put it in a context that is going to pique the interest of the people you're trying to introduce these concepts to.
Oh, so you speak of online learning. Do you think it would be like better effective like someone went to the school and actually like teach the class? Because a lot of people, if there's that online, they need that professor in like the video online to like be speaking, so they have that human interaction, so they can like better understand it. Because not everyone like learns good online.
That's a great point. So a combination of both, I think, would be great. So the nice thing about the online part is that it's scalable.
And you can do it anywhere.
You can do it anywhere, right? But I agree with you. This is something I had not thought that. So actually having the FaceTime can be huge, even just in terms of support.
Just in support, because like,
you're right,
for many people, it's just like, even if the person just sitting there not saying anything, you just see that person there knowing that you have someone you can like send a quick email to, is like comforting, and you know you have that support.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because if we didn't want human interaction, all schools would be online.
Absolutely. See, you just gave me an idea for how to modify this thing for a grant that I'm writing right now. So this is good.
You're welcome. So we spoke of the diversity in just bioengineering, but how would you describe the diversity in science overall?
How would I describe the diversity in science overall? I mean, I think people from underrepresented communities, and so not even just African Americans or Latinos or other minorities, right? Even people from less privileged socioeconomical background. That's a big one, right? I think it's the representation is very low, right? Yeah. And I think there's two components to this. There's just historic reasons that have affected the pipeline to actually get there.
Yeah.
And I think another thing is the one that I mentioned earlier that is typically not thought about when you ask me what do I think has been my main challenge, right?
Yes.
It's the seeing other people. I think it helps. It helps to motivate you.
It really does.
One thing.
Because if you like go in a building and you're the only person who's color and everyone else is Asian or white, you're gonna like looking at all these people wondering who can I talk to, because there's like no one like you that might have the same experience. So having that culture like looking the same, like, it gives you that feeling of not really home, but like it gives you a feeling that you have someone that you can like connect with and you won't feel as alone.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So speaking of diversity, what do you think would be the men to woman ratio?
So I think it's so in what field it's highly dependent on the field.
Specifically your field for now.
So for my field for now, the male to woman ratio, I think it's less than 10 women for about 100 people.
I expected that.
I think it's still very low.
Yes.
And over there, I also think that some of the same dynamics I mentioned earlier happen. So there's the belonging part, right?
Yes.
I mean, I'm sure if you, as a woman, if you walk into a place that is highly male-dominated, and what this means is that well, if it's highly male dominated, most likely they're used to dealing among men. They're not used to dealing among women, right? With women. So it does not necessarily make for a comfortable space to essentially be in.
Okay.
Right? But I think there's a lot of people working on it, and I think just that by so for example, okay, this was a great question actually, because you're talking about gender now, and so I identify as male, which means that so by people like me, right, approaching say a woman scientist, let's say yourself for example, in a conference setting, right?
Yes.
And essentially making them feel welcome. I think easy gestures like that go a very long way towards like making for like a more welcoming environment, basically.
Oh, so you're basically saying that you feel that the gender rules and norms that plays into a fact that women aren't really in science as much?
I think so.
How do you think gender norms like play into this?
So gender norms in the sense that, so I mean, think of a setup where it's like it's just 100 guys hanging out and talking about guy-related topics. So just the topics you talk about, for example. I was talking earlier in the case of minorities, the jokes and the culture, right? So this is part of culture, right? Now, if that is the setup in which, let's say, there's just a couple of women out of these 100 people that are part of this community, if that is the setup that this person walks in, and the dominant culture does not take this into account, she's going to feel alienated, right?
Yes.
Because things are not being talked about that can make her part of the conversation.
True.
So in that sense, I mean.
So society like has to work on it.
I think so. Yeah.
Well, for me, for most people, gender is like a socially contracted like that people create to classify ourselves, because everything we give it a name so we can classify. So my question is, do you think gender is like should be used as a classification term, or do you think that gender should be like a state of mind, like how you feel?
So my personal opinion is that it's a state of mind. I didn't think I could bring this up in this conversation. Do I get to ask questions?
Yeah, you can ask me questions.
I do get to ask questions. Yeah. Okay. No, I agree with you 100%. But so let me make a comment, and then I want to ask you a follow-up question, which is, so the comment is, but I mean, you have to realize that the opinion you just gave me, this is a very, very advanced opinion. In other words, I'm surprised that somebody as young as yourself thinks like that, because I mean, it's not according to how we've operated as a society for a while. Therefore, it ruffles feathers and people get uncomfortable. But I agree with you 100% that it is a state of mind.
Most people, they follow society's fundamental principles. That's what I like to think of it. Because if society says there should be like men and women, even they have like some people over here that's like evolved them in their brain, like they're more accepting. They have some people that fear the change.
Absolutely. So, but this puts a burden though on the person, right?
Yes.
If I want to go out in the world with this state of mind that, hey, I don't believe in these boundaries, right?
Yeah.
And this is not the accepted way that society thinks about it, right?
Yeah.
So one is putting themselves kind of in an outsider setup, right? Which may make things a little more difficult. But how did you grow to develop these opinions about these topics?
Well, because I grew up learning there's the truth, the lie, and there's like the bigger topic, like something that you can like research and believe. So I could like always listen to you and just agree to you, or I could like form my own research and like form my own opinion. So for me, I'm like curious. I ask a lot of questions. Sometimes I don't even realize how personal, how deep or hard it is for the person. But it's like asking multiple people the same question and getting different responses, going on Google and like reading on like Yahoo Answers and seeing. You got to figure out like what people say, what some people say. You find that in between point, and you can like, for me, I like differentiate like what people acknowledge and what they don't acknowledge. And then I come in with the middle and like take half and half and put them together.
I see. That's great. Oh, that's awesome. That's great. That's great.
I know.
And so what's your own background in? I mean, so you're a junior or a senior in high school now?
Well, in the fall, I'm going to be a junior
at
Codman.
Codman, okay. And what have your interests been so far? What are you thinking about a few years from now?
My mother, I want to be a doctor.
You want to be a doctor?
My mother always said I'm the first kid she knew that could talk, said I want to be a doctor. I never changed or nothing. But when I was like 14, I decided I want to be a general practitioner.
You want to be a general, okay.
Yes, I'm like specialized in most of the medical field. So I want to like, after I finish get my degree and license, I don't want to really work in the U.S. I want to go to like another country and do like free work for them, because the United States have the resources, the money. They just need the heart and like mindset to like put that all together and work together to fix their own problem. So I want to go to like a country that's not as rich in like resources as the U.S. and I want to like help them, especially with children, because we say children are the future, but there's going to be no future if these children are like dying off due to diseases and stuff.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
That's a great point. Yeah, that's a great point. And so any countries in particular you've been thinking about, or?
Well, not really much country. No. Most people, when I talk, they be like, oh, see, when I go to Africa, I just don't like how people just assume Africa. Like, Africa is rich in gold before United States and all those other countries came. So it's like, I don't necessarily just have to go to Africa. I can, like, go to Jamaica, where my family is originally from.
So your family's originally from
Or I could just go to the Caribbean or another small, unknown country and help.
Right.
That's me.
No, that sounds great. yeah. That sounds great. And so, what the Crimson program? So, what part of it excites you the most? You said you were here last year.
Yes. So it's a 3 summer.
Part of it excites you it's a 3 summer program.
It's 3 summer commitment. And like for Crimson, the part that excited me the most was getting an opportunity to like be in a group with like students that think like me or think almost the same like me, and we have like the same motivation for different fields, but we have passion, and we like can put our heads together to like see what we need help with. So we take ourselves out of this little bubble of school most people live in, and we like come to Crimson and we get a taste of like the outside world. We live in Harvard, so we see like what actual college is like. Like in most schools, especially in my school, we don't really have that. You start like SAT prep junior year. Most schools starts it freshman year. You start college planning preparation junior year, and at the CSA they introduced it to us last summer. So for me, CSA is like mostly preparing me. So like when I want to go out and like become my general practitioner, I can have a very high competing chance against other students in my program and outside my program across the world.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. And so what kind of activities do they... So you said you're here 5 days a week and you go home on the weekend, right?
Yes.
So what do the days typically consist of?
Well, the day from 9 to like 4... Yeah, from 9 to like 4:30 or 5, we have classes, which is writing, science, we have QR, which is quantitative reasoning. And then after all the classes, we have dinner from 5 to 6:30, and then 6:30 to 8, we go to Titner. That's like our meeting spot, kind of.
Okay.
Yeah, and we all, freshmen, sophomore, juniors, the mentors, and like the adults the mentors are adults, but like the adults, they're in the program. And like they have activities. I believe yesterday was an ice cream social, where we all just ate ice cream and talk and get to know one another. We have karaoke night last year. So we have like a bunch of activities to like bring us together as a community. Because it's like they're teaching us that you can't really learn as an individual. You have to learn as a community. Because what's the point of you achieving it is everybody's just failing. So we all have to like learn together so we can achieve together.
That sounds great. Can I look at my notes and ask
Yes.
some questions? So... Let me turn around and ask you. So what can people like me do to pave the way for...
You already mentioned that your online program, so that would be helpful for students that want to go into coding and those stuff. But even if they don't want to, students should get into, because in this society, the internet technology is like the way to go now. So if you want to be a doctor, get a computer science degree because you still got to input data and all those things. So I feel like what adults and like people in like your profession, not just your profession, but adults in profession as a whole, they can come to like schools that really don't have the resources to like go to college trips and tours. They can like talk about their professions and tell students there's more than just being a maths teacher or a doctor or maybe a veterinarian. Like if they don't have anything, they don't necessarily have to go to the army. There's like other fields, so like exposing them to new ideas and jobs can like really help. So instead of going into college like undecided, they can at least have an idea of what they like and don't want to do. Right. Yeah. So I feel like that's the main thing.
I wanted to be a veterinarian actually. So has anybody done this at your school yet?
Oh, my school.
Has anybody visited from Harvard?
No. My school it started 15 years ago. Okay. And on Thursdays we have community meetings as a entire upper school, and we sometimes get like guest speakers, rarely, but we don't really have that anybody coming in like speaking to us. And then when people from colleges come to advertise their college, it's just for the seniors and a selective amount of juniors, and then scholarships and those stuff is mostly for the juniors, but specifically for the seniors. So the sophomores and freshmen, we're kind of just there waiting our turn.
Oh, I see. Yeah. I see. So I think one thing I'm hearing is that it would help to get exposure.
Yes, it would
earlier.
Help.
It would help to get exposure earlier.
Yeah, and for someone to come in and be you don't have to be smart to go to college. Because a lot of kids, in African American communities, if they don't classify themselves as smart, they just don't want to go to college. They graduate high school or drop out and just get one of those other jobs that don't require much. But even today, even to apply to Burger King, a manager at Burger King, you need an associate's degree. So I'm we need to encourage students high school is not just even though you can stop at high school, don't stop, because now the minimum required education is associates. 10 years from now, it's probably a bachelor's. So we need to tell and inform people education really is key. If you don't have education, you can't be about the money yet.
So what do you think? Where do you think those labels come from?
Society.
Not smart or being smarter as opposed to not smart.
Well, as I said earlier, people like to classify themselves. So instead of integrating together as one whole species, we just we spread out. We're all over the world, and instead of, I feel it comes from society and how we grew up. So if everyone in one area say classify people as smart or not smart, then in one area everyone is considered smart. I feel the area that everyone is considered smart, they're going to be able to work together and achieve more, because the people that's considered not smart, you're putting them down so they don't think they have the smartness or the intelligence. They don't think they have the what it needs to go to college or anything and be great. They're just going to think they're just here breathing in oxygen, waiting their turn until God takes them.
So there's actually a question that I really like in the ones you prepared. Can I read it?
Yes.
It says, what will the future of science look like if there's an increase in diversity?
Well, for me, if there's an increase in diversity in science, I think that will help the world be a better place. It won't be something that we have script and we act it out on TV. It'll just actually be a reality. So if men and women, if it's diverse, men and women can be actually equal. It won't just be men masculine or feminine, and it's just we're gonna have a society where everyone will hopefully be comfortable and we can achieve together. So it'd be we can work together to help the world last longer, because with climate change, if everyone be oh, only the smartest scientists can work on that and these people can't, that won't get us anywhere, because the most brilliant ideas don't necessarily come from people with degrees. Come from people that have the passion and drive to think of a solution to their problems.
I I agree 100%. I really like this question because so I'm reading a book now by this. She's an author. She's a scientist, but she's an American Indian.
Okay.
Of origin.
Yes.
And she studies botany. So when she applied to college, or when she first went to college, so for her freshman interview, again I'm paraphrasing from the book. So whoever the interviewer was asked her, why do you want to study botany? So botany is the science of plants.
Okay.
Right? And I forget their names now, but there's two plants in nature. There's two plants that occur together in nature. Like this. One of them is yellow. One of them is purple. They for some reason that is unknown. Well, I'm about to tell you one of the reasons why they do occur together. But when you see them together. Okay. And she told this to the interviewer. And the interviewer responded, this is not science. Okay? And the interesting thing is that the reason why she asked that question is because of her American Indian background, right?
Yes.
There is a huge culture of closeness to the earth and to plants. So these are not scientists in the formal sense.
No.
But their knowledge of plants, I mean, your family's from Jamaica, I'm from Africa, but their knowledge of plants and the natural world is very vast and deep.
Yeah.
So, and it turns out that she later found out that, so in your retina, in your eyes, there's different receptors. There's some that process, there's one that processes red, I think there's another one that processes blue, and guess to what colors the third one is optimized to?
White, yellow,
yellow and purple. Yellow and purple.
Yellow and purple.
So this means that these plants, so think about this from the perspective of a bee. So genetically the bees are not too far from us. I mean, not as close as monkeys, but so this plant has figured out genetically that to attract the bees and have them pollinate them,
they gotta look like it.
That's science. So for me, well, like one thing that I think in science or in conventional science, the way it's practiced, I think we're shooting ourselves in the foot by not accepting or by the fact that there's not a good representation of people from other backgrounds, because that representation can benefit science tremendously.
Exactly, but
it is not conventionally accepted, right? I mean,
yes, that's society's fault. Because everybody is scientists. Like, you might be a writer, but you're a scientist because your writing is your own research. And it's like, for me, you don't necessarily have to be like specified in just what everybody else doing to be a scientist. If I want to be this paper and I can tell, look at this and like what molecules and all this, I'm a scientist because I'm going to take the time to research. I'm curious. I'm going to think about it. And like, and the color of my skin or whatever else that society wants to categorize as don't really come into play, because at the end of the day, internally, we all look the same. We all have the brain that weighs 14 pounds. So it's like we all can do the same things. Some might be learning faster than others. Some might slow. But at the end of the day, you have the time, the research, love, and care, we can all like achieve it. So that's what people need to realize. Like, skin don't really matter. Because at the end of the day, we're just creating another category to like help with segregation. And then we like to think of, oh, we are integrated. But at the end of the day, you have white, another race, and it just goes down and down the ladder. Okay.
So this was a lot of fun.
It was nice meeting you.
This was a lot of fun. Very nice meeting you
too.
Yeah.
I hope you remember that idea I gave you.
Oh, absolutely.